So I was totally shocked when my boss turned to me and said, Daniel, what you're doing, that's not sales. At the time, the Google way of doing sales was to berate our customers for not spending enough money in search, pointing out the opportunity they missed to connect with their customers even more. It was a very Google-centric way of selling, a very product-centric way of selling, which, well, when you're the market leader and dominant player in search, you can do that. It just didn't necessarily go down very well with our clients and our agencies. And it's not what I expected when I joined a company famed for its customer-first culture. But this was my first sales job. All my other roles have been in strategy and planning. And when I joined Google, when I joined the agency sales team, they had entered the more competitive markets, video and display, and they were competing with more traditional branding media like TV. I thought my role was to go into agencies and build collaborative relationships, more consultative selling at a strategic level, not just with the digital planners, but with the budget decision makers. And one of my ways of doing that was to run workshops with strategists, with planners. And despite what my boss said, it was working. Spend from my agencies was accelerating very quickly. It was about this time that I met a man called Shuvo. He was a director in the FMCG vertical. And Shuvo had this vision of moving from product-centric to a more collaborative, customer-centric way of selling. He had this innovative idea where we would take experiential learning techniques and embed them into the way we contacted our clients and worked with our clients. And that's one of the great things about Google culture. If you have a big innovative idea, they're welcomed from everywhere. And as long as you can back it up with technical insight, data, well, that's much more important than your highly paid boss's opinion. Shuva had the vision. I had some data from my programs. There was data from other little pockets of like-minded individuals at Google. And that gave us all the backing we needed to launch the Google Digital Academy, representing a shift in the way we work with our clients and agencies, a shift from product-centric to customer-centric, from berating them for missing an opportunity to exploring that opportunity together, collaboratively. Agencies, clients, and Googlers all working together, learning from each other, and aligning on an action plan that would accelerate the client's digital marketing and gave the sales team a relevant opportunity to follow up. So we recruited some of the best and brightest talent from across Google. Well, people who had the right mindset, who shared that mindset that would allow us to instill that culture of learning into the way we interacted with our clients across EMEA.
In fact, a culture of learning was actually what really struck me when I first landed in Google about 15 years ago. I started off in the sales team in Dublin, but I wanted to be part of the center of capability. And a rotation came up in people development. And I thought, I'm going to go for that. So I applied, I got it, and I had to go and tell my manager in the sales team that I was going to be leaving for 3 months to do a rotation. And my manager was very gracious and said, okay, I know, you're very passionate about learning, go and do it. She absorbed my workload from the team so that I could go and do this rotation. I had great 3 months. I learned a lot, had a great network of people within people development, came back into the sales team. And then shortly after, there was then a request within the sales leadership team for someone to design a workshop where Googlers and clients together would learn how to optimize YouTube advertising together. They needed somebody to design it. My manager had volunteered me. I'd only been in people dev for 3 months. I didn't know what on earth I was doing. I was pretty freaked out, actually. My fear was, what if I'm really crap? I don't know how to design this. And she just looked at me and said, give it a go. Give it a go? What was she thinking? Rather than pushing on the brakes, I took a breath. I thought, okay, this is a moment for a leap of faith. This is a moment to just go, okay, I'm going to do it and figure it out later. So I did it. And the design that I did then circulated around the leadership team. And it came across a director, Shuvo. Shuvo put in time for a cup of tea with me and said, "What are your aspirations for work?" And I said, "I want to be part of the capability building at Google." And he said, "Interesting, because I'm building a team that is going to be doing just that. Do you want to come and work for me?" And I said, "Yes, I definitely do." And I had to go back to my manager and say, "You're going to lose me this time, for good this time. I'm really sorry, I want to do this job." And my manager looked at me, and she was very balanced. And she said, "Look, teams like this, they crop up and they fall down all the time at Google. Sales is stability, it's consistent. You've been promoted already. You are taking a risk if you go into this team. Do you still want to do it?" And I thought for about 2 seconds and then said, "Yes, I do want to do it." So I moved into the Google Digital Academy. And I was there for 10 very happy years, promoted multiple times. And when I think about that transition into capability building, I realized that there was something really particular that was going on, very special. I call it the triad of courage. Courage, number one, from me, being willing to just take that leap of faith and figure things out later. Number two, courage from Shuvo, who was taking a bit of a leap of faith on me, going, well, this person has got a great attitude and is willing to give it a go, so let's bring her in. And then courage from my manager, who was willing to let me go, because that's what great managers do. Now, when it comes to courage, this is something that a lot of organizations need a lot more of, particularly as we're trying to future-proof our businesses. And what the Google Digital Academy was really good at was codifying how do you create the conditions for courage. Daniel's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Tasha. I'm going to stay up here. The conditions for courage. Well, the Google Digital Academy was an enormous, resounding success. We had a blueprint and we scaled it through a series of trainer programs to reach 20,000 people, 20,000 clients across EMEA. In 83% of those cases, we drove short-term revenue. And in all of them, we built long-term relationships that were based on mutual understanding and trust. But essentially, we were still just flogging marketing. We were giving them marketing solutions, helping them with their marketing capabilities. It wasn't true digital transformation. It wasn't covering the things that Tasha just mentioned. It wasn't about managers. It wasn't about mindset. It wasn't about creating the conditions for courage. So how could Google, if we're to be truly customer-centric, partner with our clients and our agencies at an organizational level, really care in the success of their whole organization? And that meant working with them at the most senior level, not just marketing, not just digital, because digital is the disruptor. It's a catalyst for change. It can also be the enabler of change through digital technology. But when it comes to organizational change, well, the challenges are always human ones. It requires the right culture. It requires collaboration. It requires coordination, vision, and leadership. So we created the O journey, the organizational digital transformation journey, a suite of programs for C-levels, not just from marketing, but the CMO alongside the CEO, the CTO, the CIO, the CHRO, country directors, all working with their most senior Google rep, working together for the big challenges of digital transformation, not just from a tech perspective, but from a human perspective. These things that Google could teach people from, well, our own role as being a tech disruptor and sort of the creator of these enabling tools, but also what we could teach from our approach to people operations, our approach to customer centricity, from our own culture of innovation, and from our leadership, the leadership you need for a company to thrive in a digital world, a volatile, uncomplex, ambiguous, a VUCA world. We all know that phrase. What about the leadership and the vision that would inspire and guide a company? How do you create those conditions, that environment where people and their ideas can thrive, where they feel safe enough to make those big experimental leaps, brave enough to take that first step on the journey of digital transformation? At the heart of all of these programs was something we call moonshot thinking. Have people here heard of moonshot? I'm getting some nods, getting some hands up. Great. Because moonshots, they're often used in the tech world, in the engineering world, to represent like a huge, big, hairy, audacious initiative. In Google, we actually have a team for moonshots, the really big ones, like self-driving cars. They're called Google X. For Google X, a moonshot is the confluence of a huge, sometimes global problem, coupled with a groundbreaking, really interesting, innovative idea that uses breakthrough technology. At the heart of that is a moonshot. When you take that out of the engineering frame into a more business audience, the thing that I find is common in all moonshots from Google X is this idea of thinking 10x. Thinking 10 times bigger, not 10% bigger. 10%, a 10% ambition, that's incremental. But a 10x ambition, that's truly transformational. I'll give you an example. Henry Ford, that's the guy. Henry Ford was famously said, if I ask people what they wanted, they'll say they wanted faster horses. But what he gave them when he created the motor car was something that had 10 times the horsepower, allow people to go 10 times further, 10 times quicker. And if I asked you to take a motor car and make it 10% more fuel efficient, well, you could probably tweak a carburetor, you could probably make it more aerodynamic. But if I challenged you to make it 10 times more fuel efficient, well, you probably need to rethink the combustion engine from scratch. And that's the thinking we wanted to take to these C-levels. We wanted them to come up with moonshots that were truly 10x, that were 3 to 5 year missions and visions for digital transformation. But not only do they need to be 10x, a good moonshot needs to be purpose-led and values-driven. It needs to be grounded and aligned to that mission that matters, that North Star that guides an organization and their ways of working and their culture. It also needs to be expressed in a way that is inspiring. It needs to resonate with people on an emotional level. It needs to make them excited and scared in equal measure, what we call uncomfortably excited. You know when you've got a good moonshot because you can feel that uncomfortable excitement in the pit of your stomach. And the final thing we had to do with them was make sure they could communicate the moonshot clearly and concisely so that the entire organization could get behind it. The entire organization could understand the moonshot and see how to align their work to that big vision. So we got these C-levels together. We gave them the best of Google's thinking, the newest Google products. We modeled the best of the culture, but Google leadership in the way we use storytelling techniques, the way we use neuroscience, the way we brought them together for their own sort of collaboration and courage. And they emerged from these sessions aligned with a plan, a vision, and a roadmap which had like milestones and metrics. And when I say metrics, I don't mean ROI. I mean metrics that measure innovation, behavioral metrics, those kind of things. And at the heart of this roadmap was Google, a partner in true digital transformation, a truly customer-centric approach. We had changed it. And when I think about the Google Digital Academy, it was itself a moonshot. We had a 10x ambition. We had great ways of telling stories in a visceral way that painted a great picture of the future. We were very much aligned to Google's own mission and its values and its way of working and its culture in the way that we brought people together to have innovative ideas and to come out with ideas together. And it sparked some ideas in me as well. It sparked my own personal moonshot. It developed a passion for culture, collaboration, leadership. So I left Google and set up my own company to try and explore that with other organizations, try and embed this culture of learning in the ways they work, try and give them that leadership skills, engagement skills they need to thrive in this fast-moving VUCA world as well. And Google, well, they were fully supportive. They actually hired me back and my team back as a partner for these exec programs, because that's one of the things with digital transformation. It's not a destination. It's a journey, and the journey is going to take many twists and turns and unexpected bends. But if you've got the right people aligned on the right vision with the right culture, well, it might just get you to where you need to be. So Google went from being my employer to being my partner. Tasha, she went from being my colleague to being my client and my collaborator and my friend, yes. And I think that's testament to the relationships that are really people-centric, collaborative culture can bring. I think it's proof that when people connect over courageous acts, those relationships are really deeply fulfilling and long-lasting. Tasha.
Now, Daniel has talked a lot about the value of moonshot thinking. Moonshots are great. Moonshots have enabled some brilliant things to happen at Google. They enabled the Google Digital Academy to do fantastic things. They were part of Daniel's own journey. But what a lot of people don't understand is that moonshot thinking alone isn't what's going to make successful transformation. In fact, if all you have is a moonshot, it's going to feel a little bit like a big, massive planetary monster looming over you, going, so when are you going to do this really big goal? It can be kind of terrifying, kind of paralyzing. How do you break it down and get momentum towards your moonshots? This was something that we then worked on with clients. In order to do that, you need to understand the gap between your reality, where are you as a business, and how far are you going to have to go to get to your moonshot. That requires courage to have those kinds of conversations, because you need to know, well, what are the strengths that you can ride on in your business, and then what's going to get in the way. So we paused in the journey to have clients have these conversations with us. It takes courage for clients to do that. It takes real courage to do that in front of a partner like Google. But what you could do is, once you've paused and reflected, is then understand, well, what are some key experiments, low risk, cheap, that can help us to understand what's going to give us that momentum towards our moonshot. And these aren't any experiments. They are called roof shots. Oh, there we are. Roof shots. Roof shots are about bouncing to the roof to then get you to the moon. What's really important about these is that they are action-oriented, they're time-bound, they're with a small group of people where you can just kind of get quick enough to test something, see if it works. And by the way, this isn't about, oh, well, a roof shot failed or it was a great success. The outcome was about learning. What did you learn to then help you get towards that moonshot? In fact, if I had clients going, we did exactly what I thought it was going to be, it turned out exactly the way I thought it would, I would say you haven't been ambitious enough. Roof shots are all about pushing yourself, not quite knowing what's going to happen, and then learning from it. It's about the methodical pursuit of constantly getting to that moonshot. Now, in order for you to be able to create the conditions for roof shots, you've got to have psychological safety. Hands up if you've heard of psychological safety. Okay, so few people. Okay, so this was a term coined by Amy Edmondson. And the idea is that with your interpersonal relationships, you are able to ask a question, challenge the status quo, make a mistake, fail. In fact, this is so important that Google invested a huge amount of money into understanding, well, just what exactly makes a high-performing team at Google. The number one dynamic, it didn't matter what team it was in. It could have been in HR, engineering, sales. It could have been in Japan, Spain. Didn't matter. It was psychological safety, the number one thing. So this was something that we impressed upon our clients all the way throughout the work with them, was how can we be living psychological safety every day together so that you then know how to scale that across your business. Now, I'm going to zoom out for a moment, because while all of this was going on over here in the Google Digital Academy, Google itself had a big moonshot bubbling over here, which was about nurturing that learning culture. And Google said, listen, you're doing great stuff, but we need you over here. Can you shift your focus and help us drive a high-performing learning culture at Google for the sales team? And I said, yes, of course I will. That sounds brilliant. So I have been doing that role for the last 2 years. And I tell you what, it's damn hard, because no one wants to pause to learn. In fact, the Harvard Business Impact Study that came out this year says that time is the #1 barrier globally for people when it comes to learning. It's all about time. And what I would argue is, okay, cool, we're never going to have loads of time. We're always going to be really busy. But you know what? We've got to find a way to pause anyway, because what I'm seeing is at Google and in many other businesses is people go, okay, it's a really volatile, fast-paced world. We're just going to hunker down and do the same things that we've always done, but we're just going to do it really, really fast. You're going to get out of date really quickly if you do that. So we needed to find a way of being able to help sellers pause and go at pace so that they could learn. And the key components of doing that are around AI, practice and feedback, and then human coaching. This is how we are building competence and courage at Google. The first one, AI, probably no surprise there. A lot of organizations are implementing AI, but this was about being able to practice at pace. You demystify new behaviors with a platform like Udly, where you can just try something in private, no one else is seeing you. Just try something new. If you fail, it doesn't matter. You can try again. However, AI is not a silver bullet. That's great for that demystifying of initial behaviors, but the human coaching is where the learning is really solidified, because that is where sellers have the opportunity to be championed, challenged, to build new networks, people who can support them, people who can help facilitate their growth. This has been fundamental. The coaches that we have at Google are leaders. They will spend 20% of their time alongside their core work, where they have done a rigorous onboarding program to understand how do they show up as a coach for the sellers. And what we've seen is that this is a great magnifier, because leaders, rather than going do in that fast-paced mindset, which encourages a very directive way of leading, they've started to pause and be more intentional with their own leadership. When is there a moment to be direct, to be forward? When is there a moment to be alongside, to be collaborative, shoulder to shoulder in the trenches with their team? And when is the time to take a step back and actually just allow independent learning to occur? This is what we believe is going to future-proof Google. These components to build the conditions for courage, to build that competence through a continuous learning loop of practice, feedback, and reflection.
So we do actually have a little time for questions, but before we do that, I just want to give you a couple, 3 key takeaways. The first one is that learning, it's a strategic business engine. It's not just about personal development. It's not just about training. It's cultural. It's cultural and key to a way an organization grows. It needs to be deep. It needs to be embedded. It needs to be immersive. It needs to be long-lasting, and it needs to be measured. Second point, the culture of experimentation that Tasha just talked about, that needs to manifest itself absolutely everywhere. Internally, in your teams, in managers, how they work together. Externally, how you work with your clients. It's this culture which is the kind of the bedrock of that moonshot. It's that culture which is going to accelerate the company forward. And finally, leaders, well, they have a very, very outsized effect on that culture. The systemic changes, the organizational changes that Tasha and I have just discussed, they don't happen without intentional acts of leadership. Big L, top, to small L, bottom. C-levels with a big L, they need to model and live the culture they want to see. They also need to align on that moonshot. They need to articulate it clearly and consistently. Middle managers, they need to take that moonshot and bring it home to their teams. They need to have that daily roof shot activity, making it happen, driving their teams forward. And everyone can take an act of leadership with a small L. Everyone should take accountability and act like an owner, because the culture, it's started by everyone, it's owned by everyone, and it's perpetuated by everyone. So if you want a culture where everyone can test, can learn, can fail well, that's a culture where they can grow and the organization can grow. Thank you.